Hi, and welcome. Today we are going to be talking about how to review an article. And I'm going to be discussing with you very briefly some basic tips and points that will help you be a good article reviewer. And then in subsequent videos, we'll get into some of these things a little more in depth. I'm Leigh Hall. You can find me online at my blog at leahhall.wordpress.com, where I talk about issues of teaching and learning in higher education. And please feel free to contact me with any questions you might have about this or anything you'd like to see me do an episode on at leahhall39@gmail.com. So let's talk about how to review an article because I think we don't always get help or guidance, instruction in how to do this well. I know it's something that I definitely didn't get a lot of guidance with. And so I put some issues up here. I just put three, some very basic things to get us started with the discussion. And so first of all, when you get an article to review, can you meet the deadline? Okay. So if you can't meet the deadline, and typically it'll say you need to return this within 2 weeks or 3 weeks or something like that, then, if you can't do it that month because you're moving, for example, or you're getting ready to move, which is the case with me, then you need to decline. Because remember that when you agree to review somebody's article, right, they're relying on you. Particularly if you've got, you don't know who the author is, but right, if the author is a doctoral student or an assistant professor, somebody that a publication really means a lot for, in terms of getting jobs and getting tenure, then they don't want to sit around. It's stressful to sit around and wait because reviewers aren't meeting deadlines or reviewers agreed to do it and then didn't do it for whatever reason. So take that seriously when you agree to do it. Make sure you can follow through. Now, the next two questions I put out there because I think these are important to think about. So, do you need to read the entire piece? So I will tell you that most of the articles that I read for top tier journals or I recommend that they're rejected. And most of them, I think actually all of them have ended up being rejected. And that's just because they're not ready to have been submitted yet for publication. It could be because it's a bad study, but it could also be that they weren't up to par yet. So when I get a piece, the first thing that I do, I don't necessarily read the entire piece. So my answer to this question is really, it depends. So I read the beginning, the first few pages. I get a sense of the problem or how the author's communicating the problem to me. And I make sure I know what the research questions are. And then I pretty much kind of skim and just jump to the methods. Because for me, and again, there's multiple ways to do this. This is just how I do it. For me, if the methods are not clear, if there's a problem with the methods that can't be addressed in revisions, okay, that's going to lead to rejection, then there's no need for me to read the entire piece, all right? If the methods look pretty good, if the questions that I have are things that an author could address in revision. So for example, an author might say, I interviewed my participants, but they might leave out information about like how long or how many times they interviewed participants, how long the interviews were, at what time point in the study the interviews occurred. They should be able to fill that in, right? So if the methods look pretty good, then I will go back and read the piece more closely, all right? But if I think that the piece is going to be rejected, then there's no real reason to read the piece in its entirety, because when we get to the next part, how much feedback should you give? If I'm recommending reject, typically for me, rejections stem from methods, okay? So really then when I'm giving feedback, I'm not going to give feedback if I'm recommending reject on an entire thing, right? On the entire piece from start to finish. I'm not going to do that. What I am going to do is I'm going to say something positive. I think you should always say something that you like about the study, because most studies, even if they're not done well, topically, they might be very interesting or they might really be addressing an important problem. So if I'm rejecting, I will really give some feedback, a couple paragraphs maybe, about the methods that I think are problematic that have led me to lead it to rejection. Because remember, it's rejection. It's not revise and resubmit. And a lot of people, my understanding from talking with editors and talking with other authors, is when people get a reject, they are not going to take your feedback necessarily and use it to inform a revision before they submit it somewhere else. So you want to give good feedback that justifies why you made the recommendation that you made, but you don't want to spend so much time giving really good, critical, substantive feedback if the person is getting rejected and probably very unlikely to use that feedback. So that's how I approach it. We'll talk more about feedback in a future video, but basically what you want to do is really balance the amount of feedback that you give. Thinking about what's going to be helpful, what are the big issues and problems that you think would make the piece better, holes and gaps. And so feedback can vary, right? It doesn't need to be pages and pages long, but if it's a really high quality piece or a piece that has a lot of good potential, then you might end up with 1 or 2 pages of feedback that you personally give as a reviewer. And that's, would be if I'm recommending revise and resubmit or higher. All right, so those are some things to think about in terms of how to be a good reviewer. We will have some more videos on this, talk about it a little bit more. In the meantime, please subscribe to my YouTube channel where you will get more videos about teaching and learning and issues in higher education and how to be successful in higher education. And please feel free to leave a comment in the comments section at the end of this, below this video, and talk about your experiences with the review process. I would love to hear them.